the stories told of late, it's been implied, is it possible? Could it be that we ourselves are the mysteries hidden in plain sight? Could it be that even though over these many years we've tried to hide our real self behind some kind of ego garment, whether it be the rags of unworthiness or even a bright spiritual ego garment, that our real self has been there and present all along? If so, how is this? We can explore this again through story. And there is that story of a great Taoist sage called Lao Tan. Now Lao Tan had been employed in the imperial court as an archivist, a historian, for many, many decades. But in the years of late, Lao Tan had experienced that the empire had become degraded, and within the court itself there were continuing arguments, greed being apparent as people vied for supremacy over each other. History and the annals of history debated and distorted. So he had had enough. He decided that he was going to shun society, go far to the far reaches, the outer kingdoms, away from this descending chaos. So, riding an old grey buffalo, shunning the possibility that he could have taken one of the great horses from the imperial stables, he set out for the far reaches of the kingdom. His only companion was one lone student who decided to stay with him, to accompany him on the journey. And the hope was in the student's heart that he could convince Lao Tan to leave a legacy for others, his students and all beings. But he was unsuccessful, because even as they traveled, he was not able to receive any response from Lao Tan when he pleaded with him to do so. So they traveled. It was cold, winter, and they shivered. And they did visit those places along the way where, of course, Lao Tan's person was known. He was famous to all in the land. So there were times when he took advantage of this, because his companion, the student, cold and starving, needed warmth and sustenance. So Lao Tan allowed himself to stay in those villages and accept the adulations with the hope that they were going to receive something from him, of course, knowledge, power, and the like. But then, finally, they came to the outskirts of the kingdom, to the last outpost before the wilderness that lay beyond. And it so happened that the soldier who stood as sentry in that last outpost was one of Lao Tan's students. And of course he greeted Lao Tan with great respect and offered him hospitality. And of course, when he asked Lao Tan, was he going on a pilgrimage? Where was he going? Lao Tan replied that he had left the capital forever. He had no intention of returning to that life. So the soldier, his ex-student, also begged him, please, won't you leave a legacy for your students and people? But Lao Tan refused, except that night when they went each to their beds. Lao Tan suddenly had the thought that perhaps, maybe he should. So, with resolution, he took out of his backpack his paint slab and his brushes, and he lifted the brush to write something. But then he recoiled and thought, what can I write? But then it seemed that the brush spoke for itself, and he wrote just the simple words, the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. This Lao Tan was in fact the great Lao Tzu. But it reminds of another old story that leads us into our inquiry. That story is about the farmer who had a little flock of goats, and every day he would take his goats out to pasture. But it so happened that this goat herd did not have the power of hearing. And one day when he went out with his goats to pasture, the day rose and the sun came up, and as the blazing sun brought thirst and hunger to him, he suddenly realized that his wife had not given him his bread and cheese and the flask of water that she did every day. So his thirst made him have the need to descend the hill and to go and find this food and water. So looking around, he saw a farmer in the field next door raking hay. So he went over to that farmer who was sweating as he raked the hay together in bundles. And the goatherd said to the farmer, please, my wife did not give me water and food, and look at the sun blazing down. I'm thirsty and need to go to bring water. Would you take care of my goats for me? But it so happened that the farmer also did not have the power of hearing. So he replied angrily, "I haven't got time to talk about the weather, what's going on here. I'm too busy breaking hay for my animals." And so the goatherd said, "Thank you very much, thank you, I won't be long, I won't be gone long." So off he went down to get his water and food. And when he came back, he counted all his goats, and he found that they were all there in the field. And so he was very grateful to the farmer next door for taking care of them. So he had one little goat that was lame and infirm, so he decided to give that to the farmer in thanks for taking care of his goat. So he carried the little goat up to the farmer to give it to him, but as he was trying to give it to the farmer and say, "Thank you very much for looking after my goats," the farmer said, "I don't know what happened to your goat. I haven't got anything to do with it. I didn't see what was going on there." And they got into a big fight about backwards and forwards, and so the fight went on, and so there was no resolution to it, so they decided to go down by the road to see if they could find some traveller who could help them sort this thing out. So happened a horseman came by riding on his horse, and he too didn't have the power of hearing. So when these two, the goatherd and the farmer, were talking about themselves, each giving their side of the story, the horse rider said, yes, I did steal a horse, but I stole it from a man who was not a good man." And so the three of them got into a very big argument, trying to make each other understand what was going on here. When suddenly down the road came a dervish, his patchwork robe and his straw sandals. So they stopped the dervish on the road, thinking that this was a holy man who might be able to throw some light on the situation. But it so happened that the dervish did not have the power of speech. So he listened to all the arguments that were going along, but not having the power to respond by speech. First of all, he turned around to the goatherd, and with his piercing dervish eyes, he looked into the eyes of the goatherd, who immediately started to quake and shiver, thinking that the dervish was giving him the evil eye. So he quickly picked up his little goat and ran up the hill to his farm. And then the dervish turned to the farmer and also fixed his gaze on him. And of course, the farmer too quaked in front of the piercing eyes of the dervish and sheepishly ran off with his rake back to his farm. And then he turned to the horse rider, who, as soon as the eyes of the dervish met his eyes, he quickly downcast them, jumped on his horse and rode away. So the dervish, as he went along his way back along the road, had the thought to himself, the power of speech, how wasted it is on mankind. So as we have these stories lead us into an inquiry, a delving into the possibility, the suggestion. Is it really so? Could it be that we ourselves are this mystery, these mysteries hidden in plain sight? What is it about us now? Have you begun to notice in the place that you now rest that when you meet someone's eyes, that there are those occasions when they kind of recoil a little bit or blink as if to say, oh, are you really seeing me? What is this seeing? And what is it about seeing that can lead us into the recognition that indeed it is so, that no matter what garments, ragged or blazing with diamond light of being a healer or whatever, that not only can we see, but that we can be seen. Our real self hidden, seemingly, in plain sight. Could it be? Could it be that we ourselves is the mystery in plain sight? Thank you.